What's going on, guys? Hardest part of the ring back here with a very, very special episode of the Apron Bump. This episode is all about NXT UK, in my opinion, the best kept secret of WWE right now. Love what they're doing over there in the UK. You know, everybody loves NXT. I love NXT too. Don't get me wrong, but there's just something different about NXT UK. Even though it's still under the WWE umbrella, it does. You gotta like really watch it. Like I can't put it into words to describe it, but they do a great job in creating their own atmosphere over there. It's like a whole different feel. You know, the wrestling is different. The promos are different, and in my opinion, that's just the kind of stuff that I like. Back in the that original UK title tournament, you know, the one where Tyler Bate won that tournament, you know, where we got introduced to Pete Dunne and Trent Seven and Jordan Devlin and all those guys. I think it was like 3 years ago, that original tournament. That was probably some of the most fun I've had in watching wrestling in the past 5 years or so. I don't know if it's the atmosphere that it presents or just the subtleties of what they do, but I really love NXT UK. And in case you aren't aware, NXT UK is having a takeover event this weekend in Blackpool, and I am super pumped for it. And you're probably sitting there to yourself, not knowing anything about this event, or maybe you know about the event, but you don't know any of the matches, or maybe you know the matches, but you don't know the people who are the people involved, like what do they represent, what are the motivations, what are the storylines, etc., etc. Well, I'm here to lend your mind at ease and tell you that I am going to cover that for you, because I'm sure a lot of you, I kind of fall behind NXT UK, you know, because after Cardiff, right, or I guess, so their last takeover in Cardiff was around the time where, you know, AEW was starting their TV show. It was around the time where NXT was moving to 2 hours on USA. And then you throw in Raw and SmackDown and all the other pay-per-views and all the other wrestling that's happening nowadays. NXT UK kind of fell on the back burner for me. So I realized that I'm actually 2 months behind. Like I think the episode that I'm on is from October 17th. So my goal here with this podcast is I'm going to catch myself up and I'm going to help catch you guys up, so you guys don't have to watch every episode to be caught up and to understand the backstory behind this upcoming takeover event this Sunday in Blackpool. So in this podcast, I'm basically going to go through each episode pretty much since Cardiff, maybe a few. I start a few episodes after Cardiff, but you'll get a feel of how storylines originate and how they progress each week. So I'm going to go over each episode pretty quickly, probably. Just kind of highlight some of the things that I liked, some of the things I didn't like, and kind of tie it all together and give my takes on how they're building towards this event. So, and just to provide a little more context, I've pretty much steered clear of spoilers somehow. So I do know a few of the matches that are occurring on the pay-per-view, so I know some of the end result of, you know, rivalries and how they're going to culminate on the takeover event. But other than that, man, I'm along on this journey along with you guys, so should be fun. October 17th, 2019. This episode was taped in Brentwood, England. And before I get going here, I know on commentary, the original team was Vic Joseph and Nigel McGuinness, who worked great together. I mean, I thought there was no better team, and at least definitely in the WWE, than those two. I mean, just go back and watch the last NXT takeover or UK takeover Cardiff. Those two do a great job in just sucking you in and making you think that what's happening in the ring is a legitimate fight. And that's what makes wrestling, that's when wrestling is at its best, when the legitimacy is preserved at as much as it can be, and you're able to suspend your disbelief. And I think these two, along with just the general atmosphere of NXT UK, it's not as produced as, you know, Raw would be or SmackDown would be. I feel like the commentators have more free reign on these shows, which makes it all the more enjoyable to watch. But Tom Phillips has taken Vic Joseph's spot on commentary since Vic is on Raw. Obviously, he can't do both things really. And if they have Tom Phillips on payroll and he's a quality commentator, why not use him for something? So Tom Phillips and Nigel doing the commentary here, and I love these two together. Just throughout this whole show, they already have great chemistry, and I believe they probably have done like one or two shows before this, but love these two guys on commentary together. Just wanted to throw that in there. First match here, we got Ilya Dragunov versus Sexton Huxley. Apparently, Sexton Huxley has a new nickname or a new catchphrase, according to Nigel McGuinness, which is there he goes, there goes Sexton Huxley. So a great addition by Nigel there. This is pretty much a squash match. Ilya Dragunov is just being built to be a future title contender here. He had that great match with Cesaro on the last takeover, and he's been pretty much unstoppable. I mean, other than a few, maybe one or two losses since his debut, but just a display for Dragunov here. Alexander Wolfe comes out during the middle of this match, kind of just to watch, kind of just scout. Looks like he's scouting Ilya here, so kind of setting up I assume there's gonna be a deal here where they try to bring him into Imperium, and that's kind of further solidified when Marcel Bartel and Fabian Eicher come out after the match. They kind of just look at Ilya Dragunov and just kind of walk on by him. So kind of building a little tension there. You don't know which way it's going to go. Most likely it's going to end up with a feud between Ilya Dragunov and probably Alexander Wolfe, but we'll see how that plays out. Next match, we have The Hunt, a team comprised of Wild Boar and Primate versus Imperium, who Bartel and Eichner. And if you've been watching the Dusty Classic, it's the two guys that were facing the Forgotten Sons on the most recent episodes of NXT. So The Hunt versus Imperium. The Hunt has been they kind of started out as like kind of not a jobber team, but definitely like a lower tier team. But they've been kind of building them up in the past couple of weeks to be legitimate contenders. And that was one definitely, NXT UK is still in its infancy. And for a while there, they were kind of struggling to build their, between the world title rankings and the tag rankings and the women's rankings. It's kind of spread thin at first, but I think in this past year or so, they've done a good job in building legitimate contenders, both in singles and in tag. And The Hunt is one example of that. They kind of started out as a whatever team, but, they're two unique characters, kind of prime. I mean, the one guy's name is Primate, so obviously they're primal, but they're kind of goofy, but kind of entertaining at the same time. Story here is they're kind of just stepping up to Imperium. Imperium, it was the 4-man faction that's kind of been running roughshod over NXT UK. So The Hunt are kind of stepping up to them, letting them know that they won't be stepped over. It's a good match here, good tag match. But Imperium ends up getting the win, solidifying those two guys as one of the more dominant forces in the tag division. Next, we have a women's match. We have Nina Samuels versus Ziya Brookside. Nina Samuels is probably one of the more the better characters they had there on NXT UK. Like I was saying, they didn't really have a strong women's division at first. It was kind of Toni Storm and Rhea Ripley, and that was pretty much it. But Nina's just does a really good job at connecting as just like kind of a shitty heel, like in a good way, you know what I mean? Just like a legitimate bitch, She's not like Alana, who is just like a bulldozer, like that does it way too much to where it kind of pulls you out of it, you know what I mean? Nina Samuels kind of does like the subtle things, like she kind of gives you the feeling that she might actually just be a bitch, you know what I mean? But Nina Samuels is a great character that they have there, and Ziya Brookside is kind of like the plucky baby face, the Ricky Steamboat type character that they're building up to be probably a future title contender versus some heel that she'll take down someday. Obviously, the daughter of Robbie Brookside, and that's another good thing is that Ziya Brookside isn't just like just the typical underdog babyface. They've gone through efforts to build her as more than that. Basically, the story here is that she's the daughter of Robbie Brookside, but Robbie has been very hands-off as far as her career goes, which has basically forced Ziya to earn her own spot. I believe Ziya wrestled in the Mae Young Classic this past year, and if memory serves me right, I believe commentary said that that was the first time her dad ever watched her wrestle. So it's basically, yeah, she's the daughter of a famous wrestler, a famous UK legend, but that his name isn't what she's relied on for her to find success. So good babyface background for her, and I think that's a good foundation for her character. And I think that provides her an avenue to have a slow burn climb to the title one day. And so Nina Samuels versus Ziya Brookside is the match. Ziya ends up getting the roll-up win here, catching Nina off guard. And so it kind of preserves Nina's heat in some way because it was kind of an out of nowhere finish, but it also helps build up Ziya, helps her get credibility for her background and for her character. Next up, we have Jordan Devlin coming out to the ring for a promo. You know, he does the whole swerve gimmick where, you know, he comes out trying to be all humble, says he's not arrogant, and says he doesn't think he's better than everyone else, but he says he knows he's better. Says he's the best sports entertainer on the planet, that whole deal. And then Dave Mastiff, the human bowling ball, comes out to the ring to kind of challenge him. You know, he's not the best, that he's the best. Jordan Devlin ends up hitting him with a sucker punch, but then Mastiff returns by kicking the shit out of him a little bit, giving him a huge senton. And we know Jordan Devlin's whole deal is he's the ace of NXT UK, and you don't bet against the ace. Dave Mastiff says he's always willing to bet against the ace or whatever. I don't know. It's a whole thing. But basically setting up a match between these two. Neither are in the title picture at the moment, but these two guys have pretty much been there since the start, and they both have been winning consistently. Both are really top contenders. Both are really strong characters. Strong credibility behind these two. So I'm looking forward to see what that turns out to, because these are two talented dudes, and looking forward to see who wins. And next, they have a little rivalry package that kind of highlights the rivalry between Trent Seven and Noam Dar. Basically, the story here is that Noam's just been annoying Trent basically since Pete Dunne isn't in NXT UK anymore. So the whole thing is that British strong style has been broken up. So Noam's kind of poking fun at that. These two had a match a few weeks ago where Noam won by DQ because Trent was so incensed by Noam. So Noam won by DQ in their previous match and ended up taking Trent Seven's towel, which is, I guess, is an important part of his character. So this video package here is basically building to a match between these two next week. And the main event of this show is for the NXT UK Tag Team Championships. The champions, Flash Morgan Webster and Mark Andrews, and they're taking on Gallus, the team of Mark, Coffee, and Wolfgang. I just want to say right here, Gallus might have one of the worst theme songs in wrestling. Like, it is so slow, and it just doesn't seem like it fits their characters. I don't know if it's supposed to be like dramatic, or I don't know if people in the UK think that's good music, but it's very it's just very boring. It doesn't get you pumped up for the match at all. I don't know. I've always hated their theme song, but I digress. They're still pretty good in the ring. That was evidenced by this match here, because it was a really good match between these two teams. A lot of cool spots. I love them. Flash Morgan Webster doing the 619 around the post, like on the outside, and transitioning that into a Hurricane Rana. Also, Andrews and Webster have a gnarly looking finisher where basically Mark Andrews does a poison Rana while Flash Morgan Webster gives him like a V-trigger knee. And they did it in this match, and it looked beautiful on Wolfgang, and Wolfgang sold it perfectly, just spiked vertically into the mat. So really good, hard-hitting match, and ended up with Gallus getting the win here and taking the Tag Team Championships off of Morgan and Andrews. So I did not see that coming, but pretty good to see. You know, Gallus has been a constant thread throughout the entirety of NXT UK on the network, so good to see them get some gold around their waist, build their credibility up. So we'll see how it builds from there. Next episode, October 24th, 2019. Still in Brentwood, England. Episode starts out with Imperium, all four guys coming out to the ring, basically stating that NXT UK is their kingdom and that no group can compete with us. Emphasis on group, which leads to Gallus coming out, Joe, Mark, Coffee, along with Wolfgang, and they basically come out laughing at them, thinking that this is their kingdom or whatever. Basically, setting up some gang warfare in the future, which is an aspect of wrestling that I really like. And in my opinion, I feel like it's very underutilized. I think that could be used more between the other brands of WWE and other mainstream avenues of wrestling. It's interesting here because both groups, Imperium and Gallus, have been heel factions. So it's going to be interesting to see how that dichotomy works out with here. Basically, because Gallus and British Strong Style had been feuding, in the past few months. So Gallus basically congratulates Imperium for kind of running them out of NXT UK, or at least Pete Dunne, I guess. But they state that NXT UK is actually their kingdom, fellas, if you weren't aware. It's a whole thing there. Basically setting up a faction versus faction rivalry in the upcoming weeks right here. So looking forward to see how that shapes up. First match on this show, the new team of Oliver Carter and Ashton Smith versus the Grizzled Young Veterans. Carter and Smith, I know Carter is a guy that recently debuted on the show. I believe he's from Ghana. Apparently pretty big on the indies. I had never heard of him, but they paired him with Ashton Smith here, who has been with NXT UK since the beginning pretty much. Really hasn't given the audience something to sink their teeth into as far as his character goes. But the dude, it seems like he has a good amount of talent. I believe he's pretty young. So, they seem pretty persistent on trying things with him. And it's a good thing they are persistent at that, because in this match, Ashton Smith was super over. When he got the hot tag from Oliver Carter, the crowd was really with him here. But to no avail, Grizzled Young Veterans get the win here. I'm kind of torn because I guess it makes sense that these two stay a team. But Zach Gibson is such a good heel on his own. I believe that he could slide right into the world title picture whenever he wanted to. Not just in NXT UK, but any other brands, really. But I think the tag team division is still pretty thin. They keep throwing new teams in there, like Oliver Carter and Ashton Smith. But they're still kind of building the tag team division to be something credible and to have like a lot of good, credible teams involved in it. So I don't blame Zach Gibson still sticking in this division with his partner, James Drake. But we'll love to see him break apart sometime soon, maybe after the upcoming takeover. So Grizzled Young Veterans get the win here over Carter and Smith. But then after the match, they start beating down on them, because they're heels, which prompts Mark Andrews and Flash Morgan Webster to come out and make the save. The guys have just lost their titles. So a lot of tag teams involved in the title picture here. So kind of just establishing all those teams as top contenders. And and that furthers it even more. After the match, or I guess like after the commercial, there is a little interaction backstage between the new champions, Gallus, and the Grizzled Young Veterans. So kind of establishing tension between those two teams as well. So who knows how this the title picture is going to shape up in the next few weeks. Next match is Leggero. Next match is Leggero versus Travis Banks. These are two veterans in the ring, but just they have not hit with the audience for whatever reason. Neither of these two guys are particularly exciting to me. It's like Leggero, like his whole character, because he's a guy from Leeds, England, that wears a mask, and he calls himself a luchador, even though he's not at all Mexican, and I don't even know if he's ever wrestled in Mexico or any Central America or any of those countries that lucha wrestling comes from. So he's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek, kind of like El Generico was back in the day, like a pretend luchador. But they had a video package a few weeks ago where they basically asked him why he wears a mask, and his answer, I forget the exact wording, but they basically ask him, what do you think makes Leggero stand out? And Leggero goes, my mask does. I wear a mask, that makes me stand out. Like he's literally just wearing it because he's so bland and he has nothing else to add to his character or nothing else to put him over, so he wears a mask because that makes him different, which I guess people have different things to make them stand out, and you gotta do what you gotta do. But in the ring, on the mic, he's pretty bland, in my opinion. But dude, I mean, I'm sure he works hard. You could pretty much say the same thing about Travis Banks. Both of these guys are just very bland, very kind of soft offense from both of these guys. Travis Banks particularly, I mean, they call him the buzzsaw, but he has some of the weakest fucking kicks I've ever seen. That being said, this match is actually still pretty good, even though it's kind of like the battle of who gives a shit. It starts off with a lot of chain wrestling, kind of progresses into a slugfest, lots of roll-ups, a lot of double pins, and the match actually ends up with a double pin and ends up with as a draw, since it was kind of like a double backslide pin. So both their shoulders were on the mat. Both of the guys got pinned, so they ruled it a draw. So I'm sure there'll be some sort of rematch in the future. Main event of this show: Noam Dar versus Trent Seven. Noam Dar comes out first. Trent Seven then makes his entrance, and before he can really like get in the ring, get ready, Noam Dar attacks him before the bell, takes him outside, throws him into the steps, into the barricade, and all that. So a little pre-match beat down by Noam Dar here, but then Trent comes back and they fight back and forth. I really, really like this match. I like the little homages to British strong style in the match. Noam's, because the whole deal here is Noam Dar is making fun of Trent since British strong style has been kind of broken up. So he goes for Tyler Bates' finisher. Noam does on Trent Seven. He does the little Pete Dunne kick to the head. He does the 7 stars lariat, which is Trent Seven's finisher. He's kind of stealing all these moves and incorporating them into the match. But that ends up biting him on the ass, because the final sequence of the match is Trent Seven doing the little bop and bang punch that Tyler Bate does, followed by the finger break that Pete Dunne does, and then the Birmingham hammer that is Trent Seven's finisher. So it's basically little moves from all of his British strong style mates, ends up giving Trent Seven the win here. So super good match. I assume that's kind of the end of that rivalry, but building Trent Seven here to be a top contender on his own. He's kind of been in tag teams his whole stint there, so we'll see how he does as a singles competitor. Next episode, October 31st, 2019. This is a next set of tapings for NXT UK, taping from Brentwood, England. First match is Ginny and Jazzy Gabbert versus Rhea Ripley and Piper Niven. So Ginny's kind of like the shitty, slimy heel, and Jazzy's kind of her bodyguard type. And then you have Rhea and Piper on the other side, or kind of had a rivalry in the past few months, but have now, I guess, gained a bit of respect for each other. It's a passable match, I guess. But Rhea and Piper end up getting the win here after Piper pins Jazzy Gabbert with a Michinoku driver. This match here kind of seemed like a passing of the torch to me, from Rhea passing on to Piper. Rhea, when NXT UK started up, she was the dominant heel there. Like, she was the big, you could see she's already progressed to NXT US and is, of course, the champion there. So she's a huge star in the making, and she's kind of a situation where she was a big fish in a small pond, you could say. But I guess they're kind of passing that moniker on to Piper Niven, who I guess is going to be the next powerhouse force in the women's division there. So good little deal here. Did what they intended to do, and the match was good for what it was supposed to be. The next match is Cassius Ohno versus the debuting A-Kid. I've never heard of A-Kid before. I guess he's pretty big in the indies over there in the UK. The first Spanish-born WWE wrestler, which is surprising to me. I figured there would have been at least a couple. And that's just according to the commentary on this show, but they could be wrong. Apparently A-Kid stands for Anonymous Kid, because I guess for his first match he didn't have a name. So the crowd was just chanting Anonymous Kid, and then they started calling him A-Kid, and I guess that just stuck. But didn't know what to expect from him. But I liked what I saw. Apparently he had a mixed martial arts background as well. And you can see that a lot in this match, because there was a lot of good chain wrestling. Cassius Ohno's one of the best at that, implementing that British catch style along with just traditional chain wrestling. And A-Kid hung with them, incorporating some, triangles and arm bars and other jiu-jitsu related maneuvers in this match too. So it really gelled well. Lots of good chain wrestling. You have Cassius Ohno getting the heat by distracting the ref and then punching A-Kid in the throat. I thought it was kind of funny. He took his sleeve off to distract the ref and then went for the heel tactic there. But A-Kid actually ends up getting the win here by count out, which is a kind of a weird thing here, because they were fighting on the outside and the count was getting up there like 7 or 8, and then Cassius Ohno whips A-Kid into the ring, to the apron, but then A-Kid does like a 619 kind of maneuvers. So he's from the outside, he kind of spins like in between the bottom rope and the apron, like kind of makes his feet go in the ring and then spins around and kicks Cassius Ohno, knocks Ohno down, and then A-Kid just kind of gets back in the ring and wins by count out. But wouldn't that reset the count? No, because A-Kid kind of went in the ring. So it's kind of a misstep there, I think, in logic on their part. But it was a pretty good match, and I'm assuming this will kind of set up a rematch of some sort. Although after the match, Ohno was upset at this loss, so he attacked A-Kid from behind as he was celebrating. Starts beating him down, puts on the Cassius clutch on him in the middle of the ring. Which I guess is like an old submission finisher of his that he hasn't incorporated in several years. But then Tyler Bate comes out to make the save. I think last week there was a backstage segment where Tyler Bate kind of endorsed A-Kid as someone to look at in the future. So there's kind of some cohesion there between Bate and A-Kid. So we'll probably see a match between Tyler Bate and Cassius Ohno sometime down the road. After that, we have a match. Joseph Connors versus Roy Johnson, aka Big Wavy. So I guess from my understanding and from what the commentators were saying, I guess Big Wavy was in the WWE like 3 years ago, and then maybe, I don't know if he was released or if he's been injured or what the deal with him has been, but I guess he's been gone for a while, and this is kind of his return to WWE. I don't know a lot about Big Wavy, but he has this like the power builder kind of frame. Seems pretty athletic too, so I'm sure he has a lot of talent. I just don't know a lot about him. But Joseph Connors gets the win here. He's kind of been on a little winning streak. He's been kind of one of those guys that's just been there in NXT UK. He didn't have a lot of success in the beginning. It seems like they're starting to build him as a legitimate contender. You know, he hasn't lost in, the commentator said he hasn't lost in 4 months, and then he gets a win here as well. So who knows what the future holds for Connors. I think he has he's starting to build a little bit of, he's starting to build his character a little bit, I think. But for a long time, you know, the crowd was kind of just sitting on their hands for his matches, but starting to get a little bit momentum behind him. So we'll see what happens with that. After that, Kaylee Ray, the NXT Women's Champion, comes out to the ring. Basically, she says she's happy that Toni Storm is not there. I think she might have been like injured at this point or something, or she wasn't on TV, whatever the case is. So Kaylee's kind of mocking Toni Storm for basically being run out of NXT UK. And then she has to kind of shits on Ziya Brookside because there was a battle royal a few weeks ago where Kaylee Ray won, but she won by eliminating Ziya Brookside. And it was kind of one of the deals where she was hiding out of the ring until the very end, and once Ziya is like the only one in the ring, she kind of sneaks up behind her and throws her out. So Ziya, I guess, claimed that Kaylee Ray was cheating, and there's a whole thing there. So surely there will be a match between those two somewhere down the line. After that, we have a backstage promo from Gallus. So Joe and Mark Coffey, along with Wolfgang, are backstage, have a camera, and basically mocking Imperium for not having all the gold, because of course Gallus are the tag team champions. They say that this is their kingdom, and Imperium is just living in it. And Joe Coffey says that he wants Gallus to have all the gold. So, setting up a future world title match between Joe Coffey and Walter Shirley. Main event of this show, Dave Mastiff versus Jordan Devlin. It's a really good match here. I don't believe... was Dave Mastiff undefeated at this point? I'm not really sure, but see a lot of limb work from Jordan Devlin onto the bigger Dave Mastiff. I think it was last week where Devlin and Mastiff kind of had an interaction in the ring, and Jordan Devlin tried to hit his Devil Inside suplex. It's basically like you pull him from the ground and whip him into like a Saito suplex. But obviously Mastiff was too big, so he couldn't hit it, and he was also trying it in this match too. Like from the beginning all the way through the match, he was trying to hit it. And then he ends up getting the win here by hitting it while Mastiff is on the second rope. So he basically like pulls him off the second rope and like transitions it into the Devil Inside suplex, which is a really cool spot. And it was the finishing sequence of the match there. It gets Devlin the win. And I believe is Mastiff's first loss, or at least one of his very few losses in NXT UK. So a huge win for Devlin there. They surely have big plans for this dude, and I hope they do. I think that dude has a lot of potential, not only in NXT UK, but in WWE as a whole. Next episode, November 7th, still in Brentwood, England. We start out with Joe Coffey versus Tyson T-Bone. Joe Coffey hasn't been on the show since the last takeover, where he had a last man standing match with Mastiff, where Mastiff won by, I believe he like slammed him off a stage through tables or something. But basically Joe Coffey's been on the shelf since then, selling the injuries, and then so now he's returned. This is his in-ring return to NXT UK, facing off against Tyson T-Bone. T-Bone's been kind of he's just been kind of fodder since he's been there. He's like a brawling character, but he hasn't had really any character development or really any opportunity to establish who he is, other than the fact that he wears street clothes and brawls, I guess, but not really over with the crowd. So he's really just here to help Joe Coffey get over, and Joe Coffey ends up winning with his discus lariat. It was an okay match here, kind of just a brawling slugfest kind of match, but really the goal here was to build up Joe Coffey and to remind people that he's a top contender in NXT UK. Next match is Ila Dawn versus Killer Kelly. These two chicks have kind of been up and down since they've been there. Killer Kelly's been on the shelf for 4 months with a knee injury. Ila Dawn's kind of just been, she had like a few matches with Toni Storm, so she's had little tastes of prominence in that brand, but for the most part she's kind of been on the lower tier. So this match here is kind of to establish who has momentum, who's gonna like get out of that lower tier and become more prominent in the title picture. And Ila Dawn ends up getting the win with a really sick looking half and half suplex, like a really pretty suplex with a great bridge. It was a solid match here between these two. So Ila Dawn gets the win, so we'll see how she fits into the title picture after this. After that, we get a Cassius Ohno pre-tape. If you remember the last episode, him and Tyler Bate had a little deal there, where Bate made the save when Ohno was trying to attack A-Kid after their match. And Cassius Ohno here in this pre-tape promo is basically talking about how he hates the term British strong style, due to the fact that he's kind of, the reason that he's in NXT UK is to highlight and illustrate what pure British wrestling is and what British wrestling can be, which is kind of tongue-in-cheek because he still takes those like shitty heel tactics, like, you know, low blows and throat punches when the referee's not looking, things like that. But in his mind, he sees himself as a pure British wrestler, and he doesn't like how Dunn, Trent Seven, and now Tyler Bate have turned British wrestling into something that it's not, and he thinks they're just doing that to kind of fit into what fans think is cool. So it's a cool little story there between Ohno and Bate, and they will have a match next week on NXT UK. Main event of the show is Flash Morgan Webster and Mark Andrews versus the Grizzled Young Veterans, Zach Gibson and James Drake. Always great chemistry between these two. I think these two have had a couple matches in the past. Really good match here. Not a lot of stakes, unfortunately, but definitely a good display of what these two can do in the tag team realm. This match unfortunately ends in a no contest when Gallus interferes, starts attacking both teams. Then Imperium comes out, just Fabian Eichner and Marcel Bartel. They come out, enter the fray, they attack Gallus, they're attacking the other two teams. Basically get to a situation where Gallus and Imperium are standing off, in which that puts Gallus at a disadvantage because they only have 3 and Imperium has 4, including the NXT UK World Champion. Now, another little side piece to this puzzle is that Alexander Wolfe has been trying to recruit Ilya Dragunov to their faction. So as Gallus and Imperium are standing off, Ilya Dragunov comes out, steps into the ring, and he makes it look like he's going to stand with Imperium. So he's like kind of on their side, but then he walks over to Gallus, basically letting Imperium know that fuck you guys, I don't like what you guys are doing, and I'm not going to fall for your tricks and trying to recruit me. And man, this is like, I mean, if you guys remember Shield and Wyatt family. Like when they first had their standoff, I wouldn't put this quite at that level, but the pop that the crowd had when they like started fighting was probably one of the biggest pops I've seen on NXT UK, and at least since the takeover for sure. So a really cool moment here with the two factions kind of slugging it out for the first time. And I know, even though I haven't watched all the episodes yet, I know takeover this weekend, Walter will be defending his title against Joe Coffey, which makes sense to an extent because Joe Coffey kind of represents that Gallus faction. But judging from this little segment here, I mean, Ilya Dragunov, it seems like could have been in that spot as well. But we'll see how it kind of plays out. Maybe it'll make more sense as we go along. But Ilya Dragunov was a star as this episode of NXT UK came to a close. Next episode, November 14th. This episode starts out with Ziya Brookside versus the NXT UK Women's Champion Kaylee Ray. It's been built up for a few weeks, as I stated in the previous episodes. This match, Kaylee Ray ends up winning with their finisher. You saw a good effort by Ziya here. A few cases, she almost picked up the victory. One particular case, she landed a nasty Hurricane Rana on Kaylee Ray and hooked the legs and got a really close 3 count, or a really close 2 count. But in the end, Kaylee Ray comes out victorious. This further establishes her as champion, and we will see who else steps up to challenge her next. Next match is Leggero versus Travis Banks. This is a rematch from a few weeks ago where they had a double pinfall draw. You know, going into their first match, it was like, okay, neither of these guys are really catching on with the audience. This match doesn't really matter. It's kind of just filler or whatever. But these guys have really good chemistry, and I enjoyed this match, and I enjoyed their previous match. I think they have really good chemistry. I think both of these guys, you know, like Travis Banks had a feud with Jordan Devlin, who is a megastar, and Leggero has been like kind of like not a jobber, but he's been kind of a stepping stone for other guys that have like a more prominent role in the company now. But now that you're making these two face each other, it's kind of forced them to branch out, and it's forced them to each establish themselves as like big time characters in NXT UK. They're not just nameless faces for somebody to beat. They are the focal points. But another good match here. Ultimately, this match ends with Joseph Connors interfering, basically attacking Leggero, and Travis Banks doesn't see this attack, so he kind of capitalizes, hits Slice of Heaven on Leggero, gets the pin, and Travis Banks is your winner. But as soon as he wins, Joseph Connors hops back in there and beats the shit out of Travis Banks. So both Leggero and Banks are laid out, and Connors grabs a mic, which... has he ever had mic time? I'm not sure. If he has, it's been a very limited amount, so it's good to see him. He seems like a very character-based kind of wrestler, and it's unfortunate that he hasn't had a lot of time on the mic or a lot of time to establish his character, because I think that's where he'll really thrive. And like I said in the previous episode, I think he's starting to get a little bit of momentum, and we got to see his motivations fleshed out here, because he was in the first the first NXT UK title tournament, and he's claiming that he was destined to win that championship, but he didn't. Like, one added layer of this that made it even better was that, you know, as Connors is out there attacking these guys, he's actually like wearing the shirt that has, you know, the symbol of the UK title tournament, like that original event banner. You know how they all have like t-shirts for all the pay-per-views and all the events. He's wearing that UK title tournament t-shirt as he's doing this, so that's definitely establishing that is something that Joseph Connors really has ruminated about, and that is pretty much his motivation for everything that he's doing and why he's acting the way he's acting. He says he should have been at the first UK takeover, but he wasn't, so he really has a chip on his shoulder here, and he basically repeats over and over again that he is takeover worthy. So this kind of establishes a end goal for him, which I think is good, because no longer will he just go out there and have meaningless matches. He has a goal in sight, and he has a motivation to attain that goal. So, good stuff from Joseph Connors here. He's a guy that's been there since the beginning, and it's good to see him starting to catch on a little bit. Main event was a barn burner. Tyler Bate versus Cassius Ohno. This is Bate's first match since that war he had with Walter. And Cassius Ohno is always so entertaining in the ring. Just the way his attention to detail is on another level. He does everything just a little bit differently. Even if just like his rest holds or his chain wrestling, it's always like fascinating to watch, and it really gelled with Tyler Bate's fighting from underneath style. And the finishing sequence of this match saw Tyler Bate hit a crazy airplane spin UFO type maneuver on Cassius Ohno and sent Ohno flying. Bate then hits his Tyler Driver 97. 1, 2, 3. Tyler Bate is your winner. One of the better matches I've seen from NXT UK TV recently. So awesome stuff from Tyler Bate and Cassius Ohno. It'll be interesting to see where Tyler Bate goes from here, because he just had his title match, he lost, so it'll be interesting to see where he fits, because they're not going to leave him off on the takeover card. So good stuff there. Can't wait to see what unfolds after this. Next episode, November 21st, is a new set of tapings for NXT UK, I believe in Yorkshire, England. Opens up with a match, Trent 7 versus Kona Reeves. Really interesting to see Reeves make the trip to NXT UK from NXT US. Apparently he's been dealing with some sort of cheek injury. I think it's been kept him off on the shelf for like a month or two. But he's back here. He's looking like he's got himself in pretty good shape. He was looking kind of doughy before. But he comes out with a mic, cuts a promo on Trent 7, cuts a promo on NXT UK, basically saying that this promotion is NXT's little, ugly, crooked-toothed sister, which I thought was a funny line there. But good to see Kona, because, NXT is so packed with talent nowadays. It's easy to get lost in the shovel, especially someone who's homegrown like Kona Reeves and someone who's still in the process of developing. But I like how they're kind of embracing the fluidity of the brands, NXT, NXT UK, 205 Live, it's all become fluid and people can move back and forth whenever. This episode was also during the Survivor Series build, where like all of those sister promotions were kind of banding together. So it seems like this point forward, NXT, NXT UK, you'll see a lot of flip-flop in between. But so yeah, this match, Trent 7 versus Kona Reeves, it was a solid match. 7 ends up winning with the Birmingham Hammer. So it was a good follow-up on his previous win against Noam Dar. So they obviously have good plans, or big plans, for Trent 7. And I'm all for it. The dude has a hella charisma, dude. He's super likable. The crowd is always hot for him. Keep him in the spotlight, man. Trent 7 deserves it. Next match, we have A Kid versus Jack Stars. Jack Stars is like the perpetual jobber of NXT UK, but he was getting a good amount of offense here. It was interesting to see him in like a 50-50 booked matchup. I don't know if that's good for Jack Stars or bad for A Kid, but either way, Kid ends up getting the win with this awesome... He wins with it kind of like a Rings of Saturn type maneuver, but it was like an awesome transition into it. It's basically like a jumping armbar transitioning into an omoplata into like the Rings of Saturn type hold. I don't know what he calls it, but I like, as I said earlier, the dude has a background in MMA, so obviously he has a good foundation in jiu-jitsu, and I think that style is going to make him stand out. Because, you can have all the high flying and all the super kicks and all the whatever, but to really differentiate yourself, you need something like that. So, I like what we're seeing from A-Kid in his first couple matches. Looking forward to see what kind of talker he is and how his character progresses after this. After this, we have a grizzled young veterans promo in the ring. basically saying that even though they lost their titles at the last takeover, they only lost those titles because it was a triple threat. And they also say that they'll bounce back, and they also demand a rematch for those titles. So surely they'll be in a title match soon, but under what circumstances, who knows. But I like this team. I think the tag division has like sneakily become like pretty good in NXT UK. Like originally it seemed like it was just the Grizzled Young Veterans and Mustache Mountain, but it seems like teams are kind of popping up here and there. Teams are starting to build, and it's quietly becoming one of the more better tag divisions in the WWE. So good on the Grizzled Young Veterans for keeping their name strong, and we'll see what happens next with them. Up next, we have the debut of Ridge Holland, who is formerly Luke Menzies. I think he's been on a few NXT shows. I guess he was like a jobber or whatever. It's like crazy to consider him a jobber though, because I don't know if the dude just gotten bigger since then or if he's always been big and I just never noticed. But so we have this match between Ridge Holland and Oliver Carter, which is obviously it's just a display for Ridge and to highlight what he can do in there. This dude is like young Brock Lesnar reincarnated. Like like how he moves, how he looks, how he sells. I mean, if you take a young Brock Lesnar and then just add like a British slant to his style, maybe he doesn't have like the amateur background, obviously, of a Brock Lesnar, but you know, you take that power, that physique, that movement, and then you throw in that British grit, you know, the chain wrestling and the uppercuts and that just down and dirty style, that catch wrestling style. I mean, this dude has so much fucking potential, man. I'm really excited to see where he goes. I mean, I'll put him in the title picture like ASAP. Like after this takeover, that dude better be in a high profile rivalry of some sort, because that dude has limitless potential. And I bet he won't be in NXT UK much longer. I mean, that dude is going to break that ceiling quick. So, awesome debut from Ridge Holland. Wins with the Northern Lights bomb type maneuver after like this sick headbutt, man. Good shit. Main event here, Alexander Wolfe versus Ilya Dragunov. I went into this match expecting like a pretty good match, but nothing special. But hooey, man, I don't think Alexander Wolfe gets talked about enough. You know, he kind of came in under the Sanity banner. You had Killian Dane getting a lot of looks for his size, his look, and his athleticism. You have Eric Young for his name and his tenure in the business, and then Nikki Cross obviously as a really unique women's character. And Alexander Wolfe kind of like was almost an afterthought in that group. But I think this match right here between Wolfe and Draganov is probably the best one-on-one match involving a member of Sanity ever. Like he has like this attention to detail that you don't see a lot, and I think that's what separates him from a lot of people. I mean, I might even put this match above Ilya Dragunov versus Cesaro. I really enjoyed it. It kind of embodied a lot of what I like about British wrestling, and it had a really cohesive story. And I shouldn't be surprised that these two had really great chemistry, because apparently Alexander Wolfe trained Ilya Dragunov, so they had that little story behind that, and that added a lot to it. They kind of had homages during the match that Wolfe is kind of the teacher and Dragunov is the student. In addition to that, you know, Wolfe is kind of keeping the Imperium guidelines in mind, how they believe that the mat is sacred. So there are a few points in the match where Wolfe is getting frustrated and he like goes to use a chair or goes to like choke him with a cable, but then he doesn't. He like has this internal struggle within himself and ends up not using weapons because the mat's sacred and he wants to preserve the sanctity of the sport. So he's keeping everything in his character in mind during this match, which is awesome. We all know how good Draganov is. We all know the future that he has and how he just connects with the fans. He has that like inner charisma that is just like innate. Like you can't teach that. There's one spot in this match in particular where Draganov was So Wolfe was down on the mat, and Dragunov goes to the top rope looking for a senton. But then Wolfe, like, just rolls to the other side of the ring, which is such like a cool thing, because it like embraces the realism of it, because you're not like healthy enough to get up on your feet and retaliate, but you see the guy about to attack. So he rolls to the other side of the ring, but then Dragunov still is able to hit him with a coast-to-coast drop kick. I thought that was all around awesome, that spot right there. And then the closing sequence of this match, you had Dragunov going for his finisher, that Torpedo Moscow, which is basically like a running headbutt. And then Wolfe counters it with a DDT, like in midair. And and then he follows it up with his powerbomb for the win, right? But a minor thing that I love about that finishing sequence is that a lot of times you'll see like a wrestler hit another wrestler with a really strong move, and then just he won't go for the pin. He'll just go for another move right after it. But when Wolfe hit that DDT, he went for the pin because he thought that was going to end the match. Like, he's in there to win the match, and he's keeping that in mind. So when he hits that DDT, he goes for the pin to try to win. And then when he doesn't win, he just follows up right away with the powerbomb and gets the win. You know, it's not just like an arbitrary combination of moves. It's like an actual struggle to win a competitive matchup. I'm babbling a little bit, but I love this match so much. Alexander Wolfe gets the win. Then after the match, you have Imperium getting involved, attacking Draganov, and then Gallus follows in to try to, and they run off Imperium. Joe Coffey even gets a spot in where he German suplexes Walter. So, establishes a bit of vulnerability on Walter's part when it comes to Joe Coffey. Looks like they're building up to a one-on-one match between these two. And they are. Like I said, I already know that they are, but really a big, kind of starting the one-on-one build between those two. So good shit all around. I like this gang warfare angle they're going with. Crowd loves it. I love it. Good stuff. Next episode, November 28th, 2019. Still in Hull, England. Opens up with Ginny versus Piper Niven. So we got some women's action here. It's kind of a solid match. Nothing to go out of your way to watch, but Piper Niven gets the win here after Jazzy Gabbert gets ejected from ringside, so it basically leaves Ginny as a vulnerable, skinny little, whatever the fuck she is, to just get decimated by Piper Niven. Piper gets on the mic after, basically states that she's coming for the UK Women's Championship, so she is challenging Kaylee Ray to a match. Then Ray comes out to the ring and just slaps the shit out of Piper. So they end up getting into a little scrap. Kaylee Ray gets run out of the ring, and then who comes back? Toni Storm. If you remember, Toni was the former women's champion in NXT UK and lost the title to Kaylee Ray, and we haven't really seen Toni on NXT UK since then, so this is kind of her return to the show, attacking Kaylee Ray while keeping Piper Niven in the picture as well. So the women's title picture is starting to kind of manifest itself. It's starting to become clear as we head towards TakeOver Blackpool. Next match is a returning Eddie Denis. I had almost forgotten about Eddie Denis. I guess he tore his pec a few months ago, so he's been on the shelf for like half a year at least. So it's Eddie Denis versus debuting Doris Gordon, who I guess is their newest jobber. Eddie Denis gets the win here. They're establishing that, so Eddie Denis and Trent Seven are longtime friends. But I guess there's been some hostility lately, and Doris Gordon is actually a trainee of Trent Seven, so there's a little tie in there as well. And there's little things in the match where Eddie Denis is kind of mocking Trent Seven, like the way he gets into the ring with that little roll, and actually used Trent Seven's finisher, that 7 stars lariat, during the match as well. So building to a future match between those two for sure. Next match is Noam Dar versus Ashton Smith. Two guys that are kind of haven't been winning a lot lately, so looking to gain some momentum here. Pretty good match between the two, actually. Even though there's not a huge amount of stakes involved, it was a match that I really enjoyed. Both guys ended up looking strong afterwards, but Noam gets the win here with the Nova Rolla. Main event, crazy main event. We have an 8-man tag match. We have Imperium versus Gallus and Ilya Dragunov. A lot of tie-ins here, a lot of intertwined stories. You have Joe Coffey and Walter building towards a world title match. You have Imperium's Eichner and Bartel in the tag division against the champions Mark Coffey and Wolfgang. And then, as you saw last week, you have Ilya Dragunov and Alexander Wolfe and a feud of their own. So a lot of tie-ins here, gang warfare, lots of good shit here. Match actually ends in a no contest with each of the respective rivalries basically flowing out to the outside. Ref can't control it, so he just rings the bell, since it just pretty much turns into chaos. There was one cool spot during the match that I want to note, is where so everyone's kind of like hitting their finishers on everybody, and everybody's kind of laid out on the outside of the ring, and the only two people on the apron are Walter and Joe Coffey, and they're both like sitting there waiting for the tag. So you got kind of like that slow build towards the collision between those two, and then you got to see a little bit of interaction between those two physically. I wasn't sure about how this match would be, or how this build would be towards that match, but I'm liking it so far between Joe Coffey and Walter. Seems like they have a good amount of chemistry, and it could just be a pretty good hoss fight at TakeOver Blackpool. So good stuff all around there. So in the interest of time here, I think I'm going to avoid going into the match-by-match detail for the rest of the episodes. Just to provide some context here, I started recording this on Friday morning. So I watched a bunch of episodes on Friday, and was busy Friday night, and was busy Saturday morning and most Saturday afternoon, which is when I'm recording right now. And my goal with this is to have it out to you guys with enough time to kind of listen to it before the takeover event on Sunday, and it's on noon Sunday, so it's not that much time. So in the interest of time and to make sure it's out soon enough, I think I'm just gonna kind of like jump into the review of NXT UK Takeover Blackpool, because pretty much what I've covered so far has highlighted the rivalries that are going to be involved, and has kind of documented the origins of the feuds and the kind of stakes that are involved, and how all the characters and kind of interactions have progressed as the weeks have gone by. So yeah, NXT UK Blackpool happening this Sunday. Currently 5 matches are advertised. Just starting straight from the bottom here, we got Trent 7 versus Eddie Denis. Like I said earlier, there's a history between these two. There was a situation where Eddie Denis was almost like the 4th guy in British Strong Style, but he, for whatever reason, wasn't deemed valuable enough to make his way over to the WWE when the other 3 did. So there's kind of like a chip on his shoulder in that sense, which they've kind of alluded to, but not really. It's been kind of a lot of mystery. And I will say that I haven't seen like the last maybe like 3 or 4 episodes, but I'm on WWE.com reading the previews, and basically the premise here is that Eddie has a problem with Trent, but Trent doesn't really understand why he has a problem. So they're kind of leaving that as an ambiguous thing, and they're not. I think it's kind of a story that will continue to unfold. But Trent 7 versus Eddie Denis will happen on TakeOver. Should be interesting. They've been building up Trent ever since he's kind of broken off on his own. Even though him and Tyler, I guess, are still friends, and Trent 7's been a single star for the past couple months, and been getting a lot of wins. And Eddie Denis has just recently returned from injury, and has picked up a few wins himself. So be a good little match here to see who to keep the momentum behind. I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure this rivalry will continue after TakeOver. But interesting little story they got going on there. Next match we have Tyler Bate versus Jordan Devlin. There's no way this won't be match of the night, in my opinion. Actually, you know what? Now I'm looking at the card. There's a couple good matches there, so maybe not. But it's probably the match I'm looking forward to the most. You look at WWE as a whole, all of the brands, Tyler Bate and Jordan Devlin are at the very top. I think both these guys you can throw in the top 10 of all of WWE. And we saw Tyler Bate get his shot at the last takeover. We know what he's capable of. He's the former UK champion himself. But Jordan Devlin is a guy that I'm really surprised has not been involved in the title picture really at all. Other than I think he had a match with Pete Dunne early on for the title. But other than that, he's kind of been not an afterthought. I mean, he's still a pretty prominent part of the show. But I think that man has a huge future in NXT UK. I think you'll definitely see him with the strap sooner rather than later. So it'll be a good match. I guess I should throw in some predictions in here, huh? I guess I didn't really predict the first one. So Trent Seven versus Eddie Denis. I'm gonna go with probably Eddie Denis here. He lost he had a couple losses to Dave Mastiff, so I think this will be a kind of a bounce back for him. And then in Tyler Bate versus Jordan Devlin, I'm going to go with Jordan Devlin. I think he needs his big win on this big stage. Then the next match, crazy. A four-way ladder match for the NXT UK Tag Team Championships. We have Gallus' Mark Coffey and Wolfgang versus Imperium's Marcel Bartel and Fabian Eichner versus the Grizzled Young Veterans, Zach Gibson and James Drake versus Mark Andrews and Flash Morgan Webster. We've kind of been going over it during this podcast. There's been a lot of interaction between each of these four teams, individually. And like I said, man, the UK tag title scene is pretty competitive and pretty intriguing. So just might as well just throw all these teams in one match, right? One car crash ladder match, right? So I'm definitely excited for that. I love a good ladder match, and I have no doubt that these guys are going to kill it. After that, you have the NXT UK Women's Championship. It is a triple threat match. You have the champion Kaylee Ray versus Toni Storm versus Piper Niven. Toni Storm's, I guess, is basically looking for revenge against Kaylee Ray. I know they're longtime friends, so there's a personal vendetta involved. But also Toni just wants her title back. And then Piper Niven is kind of, like I said earlier, she got the torch passed to her from Rhea Ripley. She's that new powerhouse, and she's been dominant since she's debuted in NXT UK. I don't believe she's lost yet. I think she's still undefeated. So she's, for that reason, it's obvious that she requires a title shot. So all three of these ladies, sure, it'll be a pretty good match. We'll see how they all gel together. Oh fuck! I didn't predict the tag team match, did I? The tag team match, I will. I'm gonna go with Gallus retaining. I think because they just retained it, or they just won the titles, right? And maybe they've had one or. I don't know if they defended it, unless they defended it in the last few episodes that I didn't watch yet. But I think they're still too fresh into their title reign, and I think they have more legs to make that title reign something. And I think Gallus just needs all the big wins they can get, because I think they get some momentum here, but then they'll lose it. So I'm gonna predict Gallus winning the tag team match, and then the women's match. I don't think it's going to be Toni Storm, because I think it's inevitable that she's probably just going to move on to NXT US. I'm going to go ahead and say Kaylee Ray comes out with the victory here. Just like Gallus. I mean, her title win's pretty recent, so I think she's going to get at least a few title defenses before she loses it. So I'm going to guess Kaylee Ray is going to win that match. And then the main event, you have Walter versus Joe Coffey. Just gonna be a big boy, big lads match. Love that kind of stuff, especially in the UK scene. Joe Coffey is kind of coming into his own as kind of the babyface in this feud. You have that gang warfare angle to it. I'm sure that's going to come into play in this match a lot as well. So it should be pretty entertaining. I still think Walter's going to come out the winner here. I think Walter will probably be champ for at least a year. He's just too dominant, and I'm hoping people forgot that he just got mollywopped by Drew McIntyre at Survivor Series, but that's not canon for NXT UK, so we'll pretend that never happened. But yeah, I think Walter will come out with the win here for sure. All these matches on this show I'm pretty excited for. I think this NXT UK, they always put out great takeover events. People always love them. People always say, oh man, I need to keep up with NXT UK, man. They put out some good stuff. And, as I've been saying all along in this podcast, and as I say all the time in other podcasts and on my other social media, NXT UK is a sleeper show. It's a show that people might not watch, but it's some of the best content out there as far as wrestling goes. And it's going to be tuning into this tomorrow at noon for sure. And I will have my thoughts on it in some shape or form after the show. And with that, I think that pretty much covers it, man. Thank you all for listening once again. Be sure to give me a follow, give me a subscribe, not only on this podcast but on my Instagram, The Hardest Part of the Ring, and on my Twitter at Apron Bump. And don't just get hard. Stay hard.